Hey, the question on the bell ringer, do you know how birds, ants, humans, and sea stars reproduce? By show of hands, if you can tell me the two main types of reproduction we've talked about this year. Give me one.
Asexual.
Asexual. Give me the other one.
Sexual.
Sexual. Today we're going to talk about sexual reproduction. Somebody else tell me, what does that involve? Sexual, like what, why, how is it different than asexual reproduction? Lauren.
The sexual reproduction needs two parents.
Needs
Asexual needs one.
two parents instead of one. And what do each of the parents contribute?
Egg and sperm.
Egg and sperm. Okay, so the reproductive system is all about making the egg and sperm for reproduction. So we've already talked about the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction. We'll talk, I'm not sure how much we'll get into that. Alright, so this year we've already talked about asexual reproduction is one parent, a single parent, and the offspring are genetically identical to that one parent. So they are clones of the parent. And types of asexual reproduction include budding, fragmentation, and regeneration. And so sexual reproduction is more than one parent, and the offspring are not going to be identical to the parents, right? If you have two parents, you can't have offspring that are identical to the parents because you got to combine the genetic information or the DNA. So this involves the egg and sperm. And the eggs are produced by the female parent and the sperm by the male parent. Okay, then we also had a unit on genetics this year and inheritance. And I talked to you a little bit about how a child actually kind of has the traits of the grandparents. So you might see some traits skip a generation, and you might see more traits like grandparents than parents sometimes, depending on how all of the inheritance work through every generation. So you can see in the bottom picture here, the child has 4 sets of genes. So they color-coded them purple, orange, green, and yellow. So in this case, the child's purple and orange came from the father's side, and the yellow and green from the mother's side. And then you can see where they got those from each of their parents. So sometimes this generation, they'll carry some genes but not express them. So they might carry something for eye color that they don't actually have, but then they could send those down to their children and it would skip. So. Okay, so there's 2 types of fertilization, external and internal, depending on the species. Does anybody know any species that reproduce or fertilize externally?
Don't eggs and chickens?
You know what? I have no idea how that works. Anybody have chickens and know? How about another species? Teeth.
Fish.
Fish, yes. Talk about, and what do we call that?
Spawning.
Yes, spawning. So what do the females do? Teeth, go ahead. I'll just.
They lay their eggs.
They lay their eggs in the.
The father fertilizes them.
Yes. So the fish females will lay the eggs, and then the males come over it and fertilize on top of it in the water. So that would be external. Anybody else have another external they'd like to share? All right. And then internal is where the egg is not released out of the female and it has to be fertilized inside the female's body by the sperm. So that's the 2 types of. Monotremes are mammals that lay eggs. There's not very many monotremes. What would be? Platypus. So most mammals don't lay an egg, but the ones that do are called monotremes. Marsupials are mammals that give birth to partially developed live young, And then they have a pouch where the young spend the rest of their time developing after birth. And you can all tell me an example. Kangaroos. And then most mammals are placental. They don't give birth to an underdeveloped child, so the child develops inside the mother in a placenta. And that gives the placenta transfers nourishment from the mother's digestive system to the child so it can have a nice, safe, warm place to develop. Okay, so we'll start with the male reproductive system. So next to definition for letter A, produces sperm and delivers it to the female reproductive system. So 2 parts to it, the sperm production and the delivery mechanism. There's probably a couple different major organs, but it includes the testes, which are the organs that make the sperm, and the hormone testosterone.
Way more
Okay, so then to review again, the sperm production takes place in the testes, and then gets stored in this part called the epididymis, and travels the rest of the way. So during the ejaculation process, then it travels up the vas deferens to the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland to collect other fluids and nutrients. You want to help when there is fertilization, want to make sure that zygote is well nourished and the egg is well nourished. And then it finishes the journey out. The female reproductive system is what produces the eggs, and that's where the zygote and then grows into the fetus, where it gets nurtured for, depending on how long the child is in there, 6 to 10 months, depending on, some babies are premature. And then the female reproductive system also is built for giving birth, so to get the baby out. So the major organs of egg development are called the ovaries. Just like the male, so there's a lot of similarities between the male and female reproductive systems. Just like the male has 2 testes, the female has 2 ovaries. If you notice, the testes were outside of the male body, and that kind of has to do with temperature regulation because the sperm can't get too hot. And then the ovaries are inside the female reproductive system. The ovaries not only make eggs, but to make sure they control how eggs are produced, there's other hormones, estrogen and progesterone, that help regulate when eggs are released and when other female characteristics are put out during the puberty time period. Okay, so we talked about the tens of millions of sperm that could be made per day after males reach puberty. Females are born with all of the eggs they're ever going to have. So those eggs are produced in the ovaries during fetal development. And then during puberty, these hormones get released, and there is a cycle of events that happens inside the ovaries that actually matures the eggs. So the eggs that you have when you're born are not mature. They cannot ever be fertilized. So the estrogen and progesterone and other hormones mature like 1 or 2 eggs a month. And then once the eggs are mature, they're going to be released from the ovary. And they're going to be somewhere between the ovary and this thing called the fallopian tube. And there's like a space in between them where the egg can go. Fertilization can actually take place up there. So the sperm can reach their way all the way up to this fallopian tube area. But it should actually, the egg and or the zygote will make its way into the lining of the uterus. So the uterus is lined with thick tissue that supplies the nutrients for the zygote. So there's a lot of like bloody tissue in there. So once a month, this layer will like fall out during a girl's period, and then during the course of the month, it'll rebuild itself and get all nutrient rich again. And so this whole cycle of releasing an egg in this lining of the uterus developing and then going away takes place once a month, typically. So just for fertilization. So there is a time period where the egg can be maybe here or something, and it's just waiting for a sperm to be fertilized. Like a 4-day window probably in all. And then after that, until the next cycle comes, then you can no longer fertilize. So it's telling you that during ovulation, that would be the time the egg is released from the ovary and it passes into that fallopian tube. If the egg is fertilized, the resulting zygote travels to the uterus. Sometimes there's a problem where the zygote doesn't travel to the uterus and it stays in the fallopian tube, and that's called an ectopic pregnancy. And they usually have to, that is not good, that causes issues. I think there's probably some kind of a procedure to fix that.
Is that painful?
Probably.
Well, probably.
Time. So when the baby is born, the baby passes through the vagina or the birth canal. And we talked about the menstrual cycle is a series of monthly changes that prepares the female body for pregnancy.